All right. Hello, everybody. Hey, thanks for the welcome. Hope you're having a great first day at PDC. This is the Lap Around IIS 7 talk. My name's Bill Staples, and I'm the product unit manager for the IIS team. And it's a pleasure to be here today to give you an overview of IIS 7. Now, Lap Around IIS 7. Who chose this lap around terminology? Just thinking about lap around, it makes me tired. Makes me feel like I'm going to have to go run an hour-long race with you guys or something. And frankly, after that keynote address this morning, I'm feeling pretty burnt out in terms of my concentration. So at the last minute, I renamed my talk for y'all. Given the Southern California theme here, Disneyland, Universal Studios, we're going to rename the talk to be Roller Coaster Ride Around IIS 7. Does that sound better? All right, good. So we're going to have a little bit of fun today. Hopefully this is indicative of the tone of the presentation. Hopefully informative, but also a little bit of fun. If I can make you smile and laugh a little bit during the hour, then I've done my job. IIS 7 is a huge release for the IIS team. This is probably the biggest release we've ever done. And the 7 pillars that I just brought up on the screen are the kinds of things that I'm going to show you today through demos with a current Longhorn build. Speaking of builds, you'll all get the bits, Windows Vista and Longhorn server bits before you leave this week. When you look for IIS 7, look on the Longhorn server build that you get. It is there installed by default. Due to some limitations in the setup infrastructure, we had to install it in the operating system by default. That's by no means the way it will ship in Beta 2. It is not on Windows Vista current builds. Again, that's due to a setup infrastructure issue for the PDC build. We couldn't get that done. It will ship in Longhorn Beta 2 coming up later this year. Both client and server SKUs will have IIS 7 available as an optional install. So look for it then. Before we get into IIS 7, though, I have 2 slides that I wanted to go through to kind of set the context for where we are today with IIS and how we got there. And so this is the part of the roller coaster ride where you get buckled in and they say keep your hands and your legs inside the vehicle at all times. Just getting ramped up here. We shipped the first version of IIS 9 years ago, 1996. Version 1 was available for NT 3.5, and then about 6 months later, we shipped version 2 as part of the NT 4.0 RTM release. It also shipped on multiple other platforms. Version 3 came out later in a subsequent service pack. Version 4 came out just 1 year later, so 8 years ago, and was probably the single biggest IIS release to date, with the exception of IIS 7 now. It introduced so many concepts that we just take for granted today in a web server. Things like multiple virtual hosts, transaction support, process isolation of applications, all those things that were brand new in IIS 4, we just kind of take for granted today. I joined the IIS team in 1999, just before IIS 5 shipped as part of Windows 2000. We were riding high with Windows 2000. We were so excited. #1 on the internet in terms of market share. A lot of people were deploying IIS both on the intranet, on the internet. We wanted to make it as easy as possible to get IIS and use it. So what did we do? Made one of the biggest mistakes I think we've ever made, which is we installed IIS by default for every operating system customer. Didn't matter if you were using Windows for a domain controller, file or print server, SQL server, you had IIS there. And we enabled every feature, every bell and whistle you could possibly have with that version of IIS by default. Of course, you know what that led to, right? 2001 came around. We were feeling really good. If you look at, say, the Netcraft internet site share data, you'll see March of 2001 was where IIS hit the highest point in terms of percent market share. Just a few months later, Code Red hit, and then a few months after that, NIMDA hit, and it took us down. It was a devastating thing, both for our customers, in terms of lost productivity and time and money, and also for the IIS team. We responded the best we could. We put together white papers and best practices and tools like the lockdown tool and URL scan to help bolster the security of the released versions of IIS 4 and 5. And then we took a step back and said, what can we do to make sure this never, ever happens again? And 2 years later, we shipped version 6, IIS 6, in Windows 2003. IIS 6 is a release I think the IIS team, speaking for the IIS team, we're very, very proud of. It's a release that we feel is very secure and very reliable. For the first time, we took a secure by design approach. And what that means is we basically took a year out of our release cycle and focused almost exclusively on security. We did multiple design reviews and code reviews. The developers were reviewing code for months. We did penetration testing, both in-house and external, had a third party come in and try and crack IIS and find weaknesses. We also built multiple features to provide defense in depth mechanisms for IIS to protect against attacks. We also made IIS secure by default, meaning that for the first time, IIS is no longer installed by default with the operating system. And when it is installed, it's installed in a lockdown fashion, meaning all dynamic capabilities are turned off by default. And you as a developer or administrator can enable the features you need at the time you need them. Lastly, the other big change we did was to run IIS with minimal permissions with a very secure set of defaults. The other big thing we did with IIS 6, as you know, is introduce a new process architecture for isolating applications that's designed with app failure in mind. It provides health detection for things like memory leaks and thread deadlocks. It also can recycle applications automatically based on schedule, based on hits, based on any number of criteria. This set of features has yielded pretty awesome results. One of the proudest things we are very proud of for the IIS team is the fact that we've shipped zero critical security hotfixes since RTM, more than 2.5 years ago. Thanks. That's a huge thing. There's basically no other web server platform out there you can look at that has that track record for the last 2.5 years. And let's just hope that it continues on for many more years to come. So we have a great bar, a high bar set in terms of security and reliability with IIS 6. You didn't come to hear about IIS 6, though. Let's talk about IIS 7, because IIS 7 is going to take the web server even farther. I've got basically lots of demos today to go through. Pretty much 75% of this talk is all demo with just a few slides. I've tried to keep the slides very minimal. But these are basically the 5 core areas we're going to go through today as we talk through IIS 7. Let's start out with configuration. The metabase. Any metabase fans out there? You guys are laughing. Come on. The metabase is awesome, wasn't it? 1997, 1996 technology introduced with IIS 4. First big point about it, it's machine-centric. There's one of them for the whole machine. And it requires admin privileges. That can be a pain in the butt, can't it? What if you want to change a simple setting like default document for your website? Sorry, you have to be a machine administrator. What if you want to change the authentication mechanism for your site? Sorry, machine admin only. It's so hard to manage IIS that basically anyone who needs to touch any part of IIS has to be a machine admin today to do it. The other big thing about it is that it's COM-only interface for accessing configuration data. That means if you're writing ASP.NET code, you have to use system directory services, or you'll have to use VBScript or something else to access metabase configuration data. Another big thing. Who here has opened up metabase.xml? Did you like what you saw? Could you even make sense of it? It's definitely an improvement over previous versions where the data was opaque, but definitely can go a long way in terms of cleaning up the configuration schema and making it much more readable and approachable. It, of course, was built, as I said, back in 96, 97, and quite frankly, I'm sure all of your coding standards have improved since then. Our coding standards have gone up significantly, especially through the security crises that I mentioned earlier, and we know we can do better. So for the big thing I'm introducing, the metabase is now dead with IIS 7. It no longer stores web configuration. Instead, we now store web configuration in terms of global defaults and site and app pool settings in a file called application-host.config. But IIS 7 enables much more than that. For the first time, you can now store IIS and ASP.NET settings in the same file in web.config. Yeah. So application-host.config is the global file that has things like site definitions and app pool definitions and defaults. And then all the app configuration and all the site configuration can live in a web.config file that's in the content directory. That means we have one configuration store now for the entire web platform. Everything from IIS, ASP.NET, Indigo, or the new name for Indigo that I always forget, Avalon. All those technologies now build upon the same configuration store, have a unified configuration interface for accessing configuration data, and have the same model for representing configuration data. That means you only have to learn one configuration system now instead of about 3 or 4 or 5. Having IIS settings in web.config enables Xcopy deployment. So now you can build applications on your Windows Vista client, which will have IIS 7 there. You can then Xcopy deploy the content, your code, and your IIS config settings from the dev box into a staging server and into production, or up on your hosted web server, without losing configuration data along the way. It also means you can copy that configuration data up onto a file server and have multiple front-end web servers reference that configuration. So you go update the configuration in one place on the file server, and all the front ends automatically get the configuration update. No more replicating the metabase between servers to get them in sync. Thanks. And of course, with everything that I'm going to talk about today with IIS 7, it's going to be extensible. So if you want to have your own configuration data in those files, you can extend the config system, put your own config sections in there, and store your own custom data along with IIS and ASP.NET and Indigo configuration. And last but not least, we've cleaned up our act. So all that ugly configuration data that was in metabase.xml, binary blobs, and encrypted values is now represented in a much better way, much easier way to read and edit the configuration data. One other aspect of management that I want to talk about before going on to demos is the UI. So we've had the same basic UI. We call it, the file name is called inetmgr. I call it inetmugger for internally, I guess, as a kind of a joke. It's the same UI basically we've had since NT4, since IIS4. And it also, as well, like the metabase, is an admin-only console. So if you want to use it to manage IIS settings, you have to be a machine admin. It's a fairly poorly factored UI. It may have been pretty good back in '97 when we first introduced it, but over time, as we've added new configuration settings to the UI, we've essentially duplicated settings and put settings in different places. For example, how many places in the IIS UI today do you have to go to configure security settings? There is a place you go to configure authentication. There's another place you go to configure lockdown configuration. There's another place you have to go if you want to enable ASP.NET authentication. There's just multiple places to go to set the same kinds of settings. And it's very difficult, very confusing for people to learn it and use it efficiently. Another thing that we found, as I began to say, is very difficult to use. How many tabs do you think we can fit on one property page? We're doing a scalability test in tabs, I think. Because I think we're up to like 3 rows now in terms of the number of tabs you have to look at when you're trying to find that one checkbox you want to enable or that one radio button. And we know we can do a little bit better now. Again, this was built in '97, '96. It's now 2005. It's time to do something a little fresh, a little new. Last, DCOM remoting. So if you want to manage a server remotely, the DCOM port better be open on your firewall. And that might be okay if you're managing a domain controller, maybe even a file server, but we're talking about the web server here. And web servers and web applications typically go through firewalls. They typically are hosted services up on an ISP. And we want to enable management of IIS over HTTP. That's the protocol we speak. That's the protocol we should manage over. So the inetmugger is dead. Brand new IIS 7 admin tool that I'm going to show off today that we're pretty excited about. For the first time, you can now go to one place, one tool, to manage both IIS and ASP.NET configuration settings. Don't have to worry about using XML for ASP.NET and the UI for IIS. Now the tool does both. You can also use the same tool not only as a machine administrator on the box, but also as a site owner or a site developer. You can manage individual websites or applications without being a machine administrator. And the machine admin has the ability to fully delegate control over who can manage that site or application to both Windows users and non-Windows users. Last, it's much more than just a configuration tool. It also now exposes health data, like the state of your applications and sites and app pools, as well as diagnostics data that I'll show off in a demo later on today, as well as users, so if you want to manage the users on your website, the roles on your website, and much, much more. And again, as I said, as with everything with IIS 7, it's fully extensible. We want to enable vendors, we want to enable customers to be able to plug in their own UI modules into the IIS 7 admin tool and have them work as if they were a feature built by the IIS team at Microsoft. So they have first-tier access to all the same capabilities the IIS team has, the ability to plug in UI features and have them managed in line with the rest of IIS configuration. That's enough talking. Let's go on to the demos. So what I've got here is a locked workstation. Let's log back in. You can see this is my desktop machine. This is my laptop machine, actually. I've got IIS 7 running here. And what I've got here is inetpub www, the default site's home directory. What I want to start out by doing today is basically copying a site that I built earlier, deploying it into my home directory. There we go. And now I would like to show it off to you. So let's go ahead and open up localhost with IE7. Oh, that didn't work out so well. 403, directory listing denied. Here's my home page. Any ideas on why I didn't get that home page back? That's what I expected, right? Yeah, that file name I used for my home page, index.html, that's a very common default document for another web server, not for IIS. It's the default document for Apache web server. Unfortunately, IIS does not recognize it as a default document. That means if this was any other version of IIS, I would have to be a machine admin to go change that setting. Isn't that kind of weird? I mean, it's just the default document for my site. I should be able to change it as a developer for that site. Well, as I said earlier, I can now do that in IIS 7 by creating a web.config file. Go ahead and open that up. And right here, I can show off how easy it is to configure an IIS setting with IIS 7. We're going to create configuration system web server config section group, default document config section. In that, there's a files collection. In this files collection, we can do things like clear, if we want to clear the inherited set of configuration. We can do remove, if I want to remove an individual value from the inherited list of files that's set as default. Or I can do add index.html, which is what we wanted to do, to the collection of default document settings. I'll go ahead and save that, come back, and now we can see the home page I built for myself in IE7. Whoa, maybe not. Let me make sure all right, what did I do wrong? Somebody said something. No, actually, this is unusual. This usually does not give me problems. You know what? I'm going to do something a little different and see if I can. Let's abandon our XML config for just a second and open up the new UI. I've never had that fail. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to see in just a minute, okay? Here is the brand new admin tool I talked about earlier. As you can see, there's something that's a little familiar in that there's a tree view over here on the left-hand side that shows me app pools on the box. It shows me the sites list. The sites list over here in the middle pane, I can filter now. So if I want to quickly get out of site, I can come in here and filter for sites if I have hundreds of sites on the box. You'll notice when I go to, for example, the server homepage, I see a list of categorized features that I can manage. Right now, it's categorizing them by category, essentially. Here are the server settings, so app pools and sites and defaults. Here are the security settings. I can also change this categorization. So if I want to see role-based, for example, here are all the typical admin settings, and here are the typical dev settings. I can also do it based on basic and advanced settings. Here are some very basic settings. And right now, advanced features are turned off to kind of simplify the tool. Go ahead and turn those on. You can see there's a lot of stuff you can now configure inside IIS 7. Let's go back to the category view and go back to sites list. When I click on a site, you'll notice one of the things it does is it provides me a task pane over here. It gives me quick access to all the common configuration settings for my site. So for example, if I want to change the bindings, I can go to the bindings task. If I want to change limits, I can go to limits task. If I want to change all properties, I can actually open that up. And you can see I've got a grid view of all the properties that apply to that scope. So I can go in and edit it directly right there. One of the tasks that I can do as well is connect a site administrator. That allows me to simulate essentially what it looks like if I was coming in, connecting to the site as the site admin instead of the box admin. Let's go ahead and click that. You'll see I got a new top-level node here for a default website. And I just discovered what my problem was. Check this out. I'm going to C, INET pub. My Longhorn box is on D partition. You know, that does make a difference. And that's why I didn't get any content. So let's go ahead and redeploy the site. Sorry about that. Whew, I thought IIS was to blame, and it was just me. We'll come back in here, create a web.config, and open it up. And I'm going to do this demo over, just so I can redeem myself that IIS does work when you do the right thing. So default document, files, add, index, HTML. And there we go. Come refresh the page. Woohoo! As easy as that, creating a web.config file, setting the right configuration, and we get the home page as expected. I didn't have to be a machine admin at all. And of course, you see the lovely photo there of me on the home page. That's a joke. The people in the back probably can't tell. I don't really look like this. So now we can come back to the admin tool, and we can refresh. And there we go. There's the rest of my site. You'll notice on my site, I've got this gallery link here. What I've done is, oh man, another directory listing denied. What I've done is I've shared a bunch of images that I took the last couple of years. And as you can see here, there's no default document to serve out. What I wanted to do instead is just serve out links to them, so basically a directory list of my images. But of course, IIS disables that by default. And if this was any other version of IIS, I'd have to be a machine admin to change that setting. Well, I don't have to be a machine admin anymore. I can come back into the config file and specify a location, path equals gallery. So we want to configure the gallery directory in my site. I could also create a new web.config file in that gallery directory if I wanted. But in this case, let's just keep all the config in the same web.config file. So now we can do a system web server. And we can do a directory browse, enabled equals true. And save it. And we can come back, refresh the page. And there we go. We get the directory listing as expected. All adding the same web.config file. Now, I mentioned before, there's much more than just configuration in this admin tool. And one of the things I want to show off is what we're doing to make managing permissions on sites much, much easier than ever before. So you'll see here in the security category for my site, there's now roles and users listed. What these are UI wrappers around the role manager and membership system that ship as part of the WIDBE.NET Framework version 2.0 release. If you're not familiar with that, basically the would-be membership and role manager systems are abstractions for underlying credential stores. And we ship a number of providers that plug into those credential stores and surface the users and roles to the application. So for example, right now, I've installed the access role provider. That's my default role provider. And it's going to provide membership and roles for me in an access database. I could also use, though, a SQL role provider and a Windows token role provider, which goes against local Windows user database or against Active Directory. For demo, let's keep it with the access provider because it's real simple to use. I'm going to go ahead and enable roles here for my site. You might ask what that's doing. Well, let's go ahead and look here. We'll go back to inetpub root. You'll see there's a new directory now created. The admin tool created this on the fly. It also created an access database, which stores my users and roles now. So I can come back to the admin tool, go ahead and add a role. Let's add the friends role, for example. There we go. It's created. Browse the users for that role. Of course, there are none, so let's go ahead and add one. Demo user. Give him a password. And you can even specify a question answer so that the user can go and reset their password on their own without having to contact you as the site owner or the developer. Of course, the favorite web server for the demo user is going to be IIS7, so we'll give that answer. Associate him with the friends role, and there we go. We've just created a user. This user, in this case, is access, but the user could have been in a SQL server if I had chosen SQL role provider and provided a connection string to a SQL server, or it could be in the Windows, a Windows account. It doesn't matter. The IIS UI provides all the UI for creating and managing users and roles now in line with the IIS admin tool. That's a quick tour of manageability. You notice when I come back here, it tells me web.config's changed. You want to reload it? And of course, I say yes. The admin tool, whether you're using it remotely or locally, edits the web.config file in the site that you're editing. So you can use the tool or you can use config directly. The result is the same. You can now X-copy this configuration from this box onto a server. Config goes with content. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Let's go on with one thing about config and admin tool. If you're interested in drilling in more in this, I didn't have a lot of time today to spend on it since this is an overview talk, but there's a lot of drill-in available for a session on Friday at 1 p.m. It's called IS7 Extensibility, Building Configuration and UI Modules. And in that talk, we'll go in-depth in both the config system and the admin UI and how you can extend it to build custom modules for both those subsystems. So the next major subsystem of IS7 that I wanted to give an overview on is the core server and ISAPI. You may not realize this, but today, even in IS6, all of the core IS features are built in one DLL, W3 Core DLL. That DLL implements everything from the directory browsing feature we just used for the gallery, the default document feature that we use to serve back index HTML. It implements our ISAPI and our CGI implementation. It implements all of our authentication methods, so basic and digest and Windows. It implements caching and logging. It basically is the web server, all encapsulated in one DLL. And every time we go to add a new feature to IIS, we have to rev that DLL, which means we have to ship it in the next version of Windows and go through a full test cycle. It's a fairly monolithic system, if you will. We never use ISAPI as a product team to build features, and yet we evangelize that to all of you and say, go build ISAPIs. Of course, not many people do build ISAPIs. How many people here have ever built an ISAPI filter? Wow, a surprising number, actually. Probably 20, 30%. I didn't expect that many. How many people here have built ASP or ASP.NET pages? Okay, just about everybody. That was probably not a fair question, right? Much easier to build ASP or ASP.NET than it is to build ISAPI. And as you know, ISAPI is not only difficult to master, but it's not very flexible in terms of a programming model. As I mentioned, the result of that is really we don't use it as an IIS team to build new features. Instead, we kind of bake our own features on top of a private API inside this one DLL. And the ISAPI interface itself and our architecture is really the same as it has been since 1996. So once again, we took a look at this and we said we can do better. So this approach with IIS 7 is also dead. Instead, we're introducing a brand new Win32 API for building core server features. And we're taking it so seriously that we took every one of those features that I mentioned off, and even more of them. There's about 30, 35 features. And we've ported them all on top of this public API. That means now you and I are using the same API to extend IIS. You can now have the same full fidelity API that the IIS dev team has for building a core server feature. We're extending IIS 7 not only with a set of native APIs, but a set of managed ones as well. To accomplish this, we decided not to go invent yet another API. Instead, we took the IHP module API that exists with ASP.NET today, and we plugged it into this new IIS pipeline. So whether you're writing C++ code or C# code, you can now plug directly into IIS as a core server module and intercept every single request and do whatever you want with it. That has some great benefits. It means that existing ASP.NET features, like forms authentication, can plug in now to IIS and work for every single request on the box, not just ASP.NET requests. So if I have a CGI or a legacy ASP application, I can use forms authentication and that powerful membership system that I showed off earlier to password protect the site without having to write new code, without having to create a new database and SQL select where user equals user and password equals password. All that's taken care of for me by the membership system and by ASP.NET. I'll demo that off in just a minute. It also means, since we're using this module approach of porting IIS features into discrete modules, that you can now customize IIS's footprint even at a granular level. So if you're not using CGI, you can remove the CGI module from the box and never have to worry about patching it if a CGI patch comes out. If you're not using ISAPI anymore, you can remove ISAPI module. If you're not using our compression or our caching features, you can remove those. And in fact, you can remove our modules and implement your own. So if you don't like the way we do basic authentication because we only go against a Windows account, you can implement a basic authentication module that goes against the membership system. So you can plug in LDAP or Oracle or SQL Server or any other store that you want and do basic authentication with it. And in fact, there are 2 sessions later on this week that go through that very demo with lots of sample code for you to look at. Let me show you a demo of this. Before I show you a demo, though, this is basically a chart showing all of the modules that are now available with IIS 7. We'll see that in configuration in just a minute. Let's flip over to my IIS 7 box. First thing I want to do to kind of demonstrate the modularity of IIS 7 is pull up the default module list. I've got it here. I'm going to go ahead and copy that configuration and plug it into my web.config file for my site. Now right now, my site is inheriting all these modules, but I'm going to make it explicit that these are the modules I want to use for just my site. I got this clear tag here. That basically clears all inherited configuration. So I'm not getting that anymore. It's only going to use the modules specified below. Go ahead and save that change. Come back to our site, make sure everything's working. It is as expected. Now, the interesting thing you can do now, since we have the modules here right in front of us, is to say, which of these modules do I need for this site? Do we need ISAPI? Not right now. It's a static file website. Do we need CGI? No way. Do we need basic auth? In fact, just for fun, let's go ahead and clear the entire module list and just leave the clear tag and see what happens. We'll refresh the page and watch this carefully now. Boom. That is the fastest and most secure web server we've ever built at Microsoft. Of course, it's not terribly functional. It's basically a null web server. It takes requests and does nothing with them. But it's dang fast and dang secure. So let's go back to the exercise we were at, which is just enable the modules we need. The first module I need is anonymous authentication. That's because right now this is an anonymous website. Next feature I need, is default document to serve back that index.html page that we configured earlier. Static file module, that's probably pretty obvious. And directory listing module. We need that to serve back the gallery. But all this other stuff, I don't need. So let's get rid of it. And save. Come back to our page, refresh. Without restarting the server, without doing anything, there we go. Our site's back up and running, including the gallery. The difference, instead of 40-odd modules, we only have 4. That means an order of magnitude less attack surface. That means if these are the only modules I want to have on the box, and this is the only kind of workload I want to surface, I can remove the other modules from the box, not only the configuration, but also the binaries, and not have to worry about patching those binaries or dealing with them ever again. That's the kind of flexibility we're going to have with IIS 7. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that you can now plug in existing ASP.NET modules directly into the IIS pipeline and use them for all types of requests. So let's do that. These actually are ASP.NET would-be, so ASP.NET 2.0 modules, including the Forms Auth module, the role manager that we used earlier, and URL authorization. I'm plugging them in now into this modules list. So that's the IIS modules list. Some of you ASP.NET guys might look at this and say, hey, this looks a lot like the HP modules in ASP.NET. In fact, it does. It looks very much like that. It's not the same thing. In ASP.NET case, we're in the system web config section group, and we're configuring the HP modules section. That capability still exists today. So if you want to plug modules in at just the ASP.NET level, you can do that. In this case, though, we're plugging them directly into the IIS module list. So they'll intercept every single request on the box. To demonstrate that, next thing we're going to have to do is actually configure forms authentication for this app. I do that using the same configuration tags I would for an ASP.NET app. So authentication, mode equals forms. And then authorization. List, we're going to do allow the friends role that we created earlier. And the next rule we're going to define is deny everyone else that comes in. So with those 3 or 4 lines of XML, we've now configured authentication for my site. Last thing we need to do is create a login form. With ASP.NET 2.0, that's extremely easy. I just do login ASPX. And I don't have to write any code. All I have to do is declaratively form runat server, ASP login runat server. And yeah, I know I should put a lot more stuff in there to be absolutely correct. But that will do it. I hit refresh. And instead of getting the static file page back, IIS knows that forms authentication is plugged in. It redirects me to the login form. I can go ahead and type my password, username, password, and we're in the static file website. So without writing any code, without connecting up to the membership store, without doing any of that, I just used the login control to password protect a static file website. Now, that's pretty cool, but what if I'm not happy with the way IIS does things? For example, this directory listing that you see here. I hate to say it, but it looks pretty much the same as it did with IIS 6, doesn't it? In fact, it looks pretty much the same as it did with IIS 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. We haven't been innovating really a lot in the directory listing space. I decided that I could maybe try out a little innovation. I'd try off this new public extensibility model that we're that we're evangelizing. So I went ahead and built a replacement module to show off just what you can do using a few hundred lines of C# code and the existing IHP module interface. So let's go ahead and deploy my module. I've got it right here. I'll go ahead and copy it right there. As a bin in the bin directory, I've just deployed a new IIS module, dirlist module, and I've also deployed a handler. I'll talk about the handler and what it does in just a minute. So we've got that deployed. Let's go ahead and configure it. Here is the directory listing module that IIS shipped. Let's get rid of it and plug in mine, dirlist module. Mine is a managed module, so I've got to give it a type, dirlist module. Other thing I have to do is configure the handler that I showed. Basically what I've done is I've also implemented an IHP handler. And what a handler is basically a module that intercepts a certain type of extension. So right here I configure basically two handlers. They're both in this image handler assembly. One is intercepting IMG requests. The other is intercepting RSS requests. So go ahead and save that. Come back to our site and refresh the page because we've deployed the handler. The handler and module, we've configured them. Now we can refresh. And again, without restarting the server or anything, my module gets the request and sends back much nicer looking HTML than the IIS team did. If I click on one of the images here, you'll see what's happening with the handler. You'll see the URLs getting rewritten to an IMG extension. And that means the handler picks up the request. It pulls the file off the disk. And in the thumbnail case, in this case, it resizes it to thumbnail size and spits back just the thumbnail across the network, so saving bandwidth. The other thing it does is it implements this navigation control, so I can do next and previous as I browse through my directory listing. And just to prove that it is a real live directory listing and not some HTML I crafted somehow behind the scenes, let's go ahead and create a subdir. We can copy a couple images into it and come back and refresh the page. And there we go. There's the subdirectory. There's the images we copied. So it's a real directory listing, replacing the IIS built-in module with something a little better looking. That's how easy it is to build a new module and replace an existing IIS module. I mentioned I had an RSS handler here as well. It was pretty easy once I spat back prettier HTML to say, hey, what if instead I spit back XML? So think of the scenario like this. I've got a directory here with my favorite photos in. What if my mom wants to subscribe to this gallery, which is just a directory listing, and every time I publish a new image in there, she can get an RSS notification? Well, I did that, and right here you can see IE7's letting me know this has an RSS feed on it. I can go ahead and click on that. You'll see my handler, the RSS handler, gets invoked. And here we go. Here's an XML representation of my directory listing. Again, all of this was done using the existing ASP.NET IHP module and IHP handler APIs. And it took about 200 or 300 lines of code. So very easy to do, yet very, very powerful. All right. That is componentization. Next thing, before I go on, though, let me mention there are 2 talks around this. So if you want to dig in much deeper into building core server modules and building more powerful ASP.NET applications with IIS 7, there are 2 talks. Both of them are tomorrow, back to back pretty much. One's at 11 o'clock and the other's at 1:45. I highly recommend you go to those if you want to learn more. Next big area we're working on with IIS 7 is diagnostics. Today, customers often tell us, requests come into IIS, and it's like a black box. They go in, and most of the time they come out okay, as expected, but sometimes something goes wrong, and it's really, really, really hard to figure out what's going on, right? Like CPU goes to 100%. W3WP is taking all the CPU. What's going on? Or randomly I start getting server 500 errors. And who knows why. And it's really hard to pinpoint where in the request processing cycle the problem is happening. So we're doing a couple of really important things to make this much better with IIS 7. For the first time, you're going to be able to see inside IIS and see what's going on. So, for example, you can now see what's the state of the app pools in the box, what's the state of the worker processes in the box. You can even drill into a worker process and see what are the current requests in flight in real time. You can monitor that, look for long-running requests that might be hanging the CPU. You can measure the times that it takes for a request to go through from module to module. Get much better transparency into what's going on inside IIS. You can also use this API we're introducing, the state API, to control the state of sites, apps, app pools, and app domains. So if you want to unload an app domain explicitly for a particular application, you can do that. If you want to stop an application pool, take it out offline for a few minutes, you can do that. Another big thing you can now do with IIS 7 is you can log a detailed trace log of everything that happened during the request lifecycle. So, for example, as a request comes into IIS and makes its way through that module pipeline that I showed earlier, you can see as it transitions from module to module to module. You can see which module is taking the longest to process the request. You can see if one of the modules returns a security access denied error, or maybe the request never exits the module. In that case, you know exactly where in the request path the request is hanging. We're not only making it possible to log these detailed trace events, but we're making it automatic. So you can go into IIS now, you can say, hey, I'm seeing server 500 errors for this particular page or this particular set of pages. And IIS will look out for random server 500 errors, and anytime it sees one, it will automatically log that detailed trace event stack of everything that happened during the request path. You can also do it based on time. So if you see requests starting to time out from time to time, you can say, hey, IIS, if you ever see requests come in that take longer than a minute, log that detailed trace stack so you can see exactly where in the request path the request is hanging. And of course, like everything else with IIS, it's extensible. So in your module code or in your page code, you can add events. And when these notifications trigger, when errors happen, we'll log not only our events, but your events as well in the same log file. So you can see the request as it transitions through our code, into your code, and back out to the client. Let's show that off. Come back to my IIS 7 server. First thing I need to do is add back a couple of modules. I was a little aggressive in what I removed earlier, so let's go ahead and add a few back in. What I've got is basically 5 more modules that I'm going to use, including access check module, which does basically ISAPI and CGI restriction list, the lockdown feature you're probably familiar with IIS 6. ISAPI module, which is pretty self-explanatory. It implements the ISAPI interface. Request monitoring, which I'm going to demonstrate to you today. Custom errors to send back custom errors to the client. And failed request tracing module to do that automatic tracing I talked about. So with those changes, I'm going to go ahead and save. And the next thing I need to do is write some bad code. So don't tell anybody. I already did this once today, but I'm going to do it again. Badguy.asp. Create this. I know you guys never write this kind of code, but just for demo purposes. While I is less than 10, j equals j plus 1. When response.write. I'm done. You guys know what's going to happen here with it when I make this request? Yep, it's going to go to lunch, as the gentleman here in the front said. It's going to sit there and loop and loop and loop because I will never get greater than 10, not with j incrementing there. So let's go ahead and make the request and watch that happen. Maybe. Let's see. Badguy.asp. No, it didn't happen. Instead, I got a 404. A great segue into the automatic tracing capabilities that I talked about earlier. Let's figure out why we're getting that 404, because IIS sends back 404 for lots of reasons, don't we? So let's go figure out what's happening. Come down to the failed request tracing rules, and let's create a new rule for my site. Have a look at all ASP requests. Tell it we're going to try and troubleshoot a 404 error. And let's log. This is where you can determine basically what types of events are logged. In this case, we're going to log the web server events, warning level and above for all those areas. Go ahead and finish that out. Now, by default, we log in this inet pub feld rec log files directory. We basically create a new subdirectory for each site and put the log file in there. As you can see right now, the directory is empty. Now that I've configured IIS to look out for that error condition, the next time it repros, we'll repro right there, you'll see a log file is generated. Now, this log file format right now is temporary. It's kind of ugly, but hopefully you can see what's going on anyway. Let's go ahead and open it up in Visual Studio. You'll see first event that we see is a general request start. That means IIS got the request. It logs a whole bunch of information about it, including things like which app pool is running in, what the URL was that was requested, etc. The very next event we see is security denied by ISAPI restriction. And it tells me right here, here's the image name, here's the ISAPI that attempted to load to service the request, which was denied. So I know exactly which event caused the error that I'm seeing, because the next event we see is general send custom error. You can see that send back to 404.2. And then the last event is general request end. So that's pretty straightforward. We know now the request was dropped because of the ISAPI restriction list. So let's go back in, ISAPI and CGI restrictions. Here's ASP. In fact, it is not allowed. So let's allow it. And open up Task Manager, because this next part's always my favorite part. Come back to the page. Request it again. Come on. There we go. Where's that response? Oh. 100% CPU. Let's sort by CPU and see what's going on here. Man, IIS, that troublemaker, 100% CPU again. Of course, we know better than that. We know it is my bad code that's doing it. But what are my next steps here with any version of IIS other than IIS 7? End process. Well, I got the login page again. Let's try it again. See if it repros. Of course, I submit the credentials again. We're right back up at 100% CPU. That didn't help an awful lot, did it? Who suggested that anyway? Some developer. Is that what you tell your administrator when he calls up? Well, now you can tell him to do something different. Now you can tell him to come into the IIS UI, go down to worker processes, and he can check out all the app pools on the box. Oh, there's that default app pool, 92% CPU. He can view current requests, and he can see, hey, there's a suspicious URL here that's taking lots and lots of time, and it's sitting in ISAPI module, and the URL is badguy.asp. Did you write that code? He can stop the site from here. He can call you up and say, you know, badguy.asp is performing poorly. Can you take a look? So it's much, much easier now, much more transparent to look inside IIS and see what's going wrong. Of course, if this was a real server, I'd have many requests here, but I could filter based on elapsed time. I can sort the requests by elapsed time, etc. The UI provides a wrapper for it. I should also mention, though, it's not just a UI thing. This is a COM API we have exposed. It is wrapped by both our WMI provider, so you can programmatically access this data. We also have a command line tool that manages IIS and all the state information, as well as configuration. And the UI provides a nice GUI experience as well. Can you freeze the screen? Right now you can't freeze it or save it anyway. That's an interesting feature request. The gentleman asked if I could freeze the screen, so if IIS went down, we could come back and refer to it later. Right now that's not possible, but that's a good request. So that is supportability with IIS 7. What do you think? Is that going to be a better experience than IIS 6? Yes. I agree. I think those are some of the coolest features we've got, actually. If you want to learn more about the features I just showed off, we do have a session on that as well. It is tomorrow at 11:30, and it's called Instrumenting, Diagnosing, and Debugging Web Apps. So, compatibility. The good news here, ISAPI filters and extensions will just work. More good news, classic ASP apps just work. More good news, ASP.NET V1 and V2 apps will just work. And any ADSI and WMI scripts you have existing will continue to work. Despite all the changes we're making to both the core web server and the config system, we know that customers are not going to move to IIS 7 if they can't leverage their existing investments. So we're putting a lot of effort and time into making sure those investments can carry forward. I tried to figure out how to demonstrate this, and it's kind of hard to figure out a way to prove it. I've shown ASP, classic ASP already. I figured out maybe the best way to show it is to show you that we're really taking compatibility seriously by actually downloading a very popular scripting environment called PHP and showing you that PHP runs on IIS 7 just great. Does that sound okay to you? So let me show you. It's so easy, I can't not do it. I basically downloaded PHP and unzipped it right here from the web, unzipped it into my D drive PHP directory. I didn't change anything else. Right? Now all I have to do is come into the handler's configuration, tell it that we're going to configure a new handler, PHP handler for intercepting PHP requests. It's going to look for file requests, script access. These types of requests should get routed to the ISAPI module. The ISAPI module will then look for a script processor. So I have to tell it when PHP requests come in, hand it off to the PHP 5 ISAPI DLL for processing. Go ahead and finish that out. We now have a script map set up. We can now enable it in the ISAPI restriction list. So go ahead and give it the path to the PHP ISAPI we configured earlier. Give it a group and description, allow it, and now PHP is enabled on my box. To prove it, I'll write the only line of PHP code that I know. I promise. Come on. Faster if I killed that request that was, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and let's do test.php. Now, this is something you won't see every day. Writing PHP in Visual Studio. PHP info. That's the only line of PHP I know. It basically spits back a whole bunch of internal goop about PHP. Now, this is kind of fun. I'm going to close IE because I'm going to show you kind of end-to-end, once again, how forms authentication works with all types of requests, even PHP requests. So we're going to request test.php, get redirected to login page. Go ahead, log in as my demo user. And there we go, PHP page comes back. Just to prove it, come down here. You can see here's basically the ISAPI vars that it sends back running on IIS 7. In fact, here's kind of interesting. It even grabs the auth type of forms and auth user as demo. So PHP users can now take advantage of ASP.NET too. Hopefully that illustrates how we're taking compatibility seriously. Security. We started kind of on a low note for security. We do take security very seriously with everything we do now. We want to make sure that what happened in 2001 doesn't happen again. Hopefully I've convinced you with the componentization stuff that now, more than ever before, you're going to be able to reduce attack surface on web servers by removing modules that really aren't necessary on the box, avoid patching them. I've also shown you how IIS 7 enables site owners and developers to access configuration without being a machine admin. You might say, that's kind of weird. Is that a security advantage or not? In fact, it is. It means that devs don't have to elevate to admin privilege to do a simple task like set a default document. It also means the delegation infrastructure we have in here, which I haven't shown off today because it's more an admin scenario, is very flexible and very granular in terms of the way administrators can configure the delegation and the things that they can enable. Another thing that I've shown off is how easy it is to now take advantage of the unified authentication authorization model for securing websites and applications, using the new membership and role management system and using the new integrated pipeline. Last thing to mention here is filtering, request filtering. You probably all know about URL scan, which is an ISAPI filter we have today for IS 4, 5, and 6 that basically acts as a front door for requests, and it can filter requests based on any number of criteria. We now have that capability baked into IS 7. It is a module that ships with IS 7. It has integrated config and UI experience now. So request filtering is now a first-class feature of the web server. Just to wrap up, because I know we're just about out of time, IS 7 is a very exciting release. I hope you agree with me today through what you've seen. It basically enables, for the very first time, distributed configuration through that web.config file and delegated configuration for developers. It means a much more tremendous extensibility and flexibility for building core server modules, for building UI modules, for building configuration extensions. Basically, developers have the same level of APIs, the same fidelity APIs that the IS team has for building IS features. Much better diagnostics and troubleshooting support, and a commitment to compatibility. And of course, all of this is built on the rock-solid security and reliability that you're enjoying today with IS 6. So with that, I'll wrap it up. And thank you for your time. It was a great audience, and thanks for being so patient with me. We do have a few more minutes for questions. If anyone has a question, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah, right here.
Did you write your own role provider and will it be configured through there also?
Yes. Yep. The question up front was, if I write my own role provider or membership provider, can it be configured through that IS UI? The answer is absolutely yes. It'll show up as one of the selectable providers for anyone that has access to that configuration. And they'll be able to configure users through your provider as well.
I have one other question.
One other question, yeah.
Can the administrator shut down the types of configuration that a dev can do? Can they
Yep.
overwrite sections?
Yeah, so the question was, can an administrator lock down or override configuration that a developer has access to? The answer is yes. By default, our IS 7 configuration will be limited to that application host.config file. And basically, the administrator enables which types of configuration can be delegated or distributed.
Is this shipping in the beta?
The question was, is this shipping in the beta? It is in the PDC bits that you'll get this week. It's in the server build. It will also be in Longhorn Server Beta 2 and Windows Vista Beta 2, which Beta 2 basically ships later this year. It's not in Beta 1 right now. Yeah?
In the gallery folder that you created, and then you actually showed how you created a group called Friends, and then you added a user demo.
Uh-huh.
On that particular dialog, I saw you had created a username and then you entered a password. I just saw this one of the SQL Server demos where in the Windows environment, if there are certain password restrictions, SQL Server now also inherits some of those password restrictions. But IIS 7 seems to have lost that gap. So any particular reason why you don't honor that? Like on my Windows machine as an administrator, I say it has to meet this criteria. And I want to make sure that any users that they create in IIS, I want to make sure that also has a strong password. But in IIS 7, I didn't see that.
So so the password restrictions that you're referring to are for Windows users.
It's not inherited in IIS.
But they will be enforced. So if you do have password restrictions and you're using the Windows token role provider, membership provider,
right.
Those restrictions will be enforced. The membership system also has password restrictions that you can set up for it. So for any other user store, so if you're going against Access or SQL, it also enforces strong passwords through the membership provider.
If I'm using a third-party single sign-on provider, then how does that work? So because if I have, in my corporation, there is a single sign-on already deployed, and we want to take advantage of that feature, how does that fit into this model?
If that plugs into the membership system,
Yeah.
The membership system does provide password restriction capabilities as well, so you can lock down at that level for all providers. Yeah.
You told about compatibility
Yeah.
and database access using the legacy interfaces. Is this true for custom properties? When you create custom properties and access them?
Yeah, so custom metabase properties. Yeah, custom metabase properties are persisted in the app host config file. I didn't show them off today, but they are persisted there, along with all the IIS configuration. And if you access them through ABO or through ADSI, they'll be read and written to just as they were with IIS 6. Yeah, you can also extend, so we basically store any custom properties that we don't recognize as kind of generics in the app host config file, but you can actually implement your own config section and have kind of have basically strongly typed and well-known config section to represent your data going forward with IIS 7. Yeah, another question.
In a corporate internet environment, will the membership system handle logins across multiple applications? Or how's the best way to handle that situation? I feel like kind of left out in the cold with the corporate internet.
So the question is, will the login work across multiple applications? The single sign-on scenario? That's a good question. The single sign-on feature is actually not built by the IIS team. It's built by the security team at Microsoft. And I'd have to go back and check to see how that works, because I'm not intimately familiar with it. But that'd be a great question for me to follow up on. If you want to send me your contact info, I can definitely follow up on that with you. My email address for anybody who has questions as well but can't talk to me now is Bill S. So bills, just don't send me any invoices. I don't pay the bills of Microsoft. My alias is bills@microsoft.com. Yeah. Yeah.
Would IIS 7 be available to Windows Server 2003?
Will IIS 7 be available down level? I get that question every time I do the talk. Right now, we're targeting Longhorn client and server. So we'll be shipping in beta 2 for client and server. We haven't made a final decision on where we'll ship the final release. Probably make that decision after beta 2 sometime. But right now, we're just focused on Longhorn client and server, trying to get on that train and make sure we ship there. So since it's going out next year, we got to be on board.
What about HTTPD sys? What about HTTPD sys?
What about HTTP/sys? What features are there, or new features? And is that your question?
Is there still kernel module used for serving requests for static files?
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the relationship between IIS and HTTP/sys, it hasn't changed fundamentally since IIS 6. The only changes are HTTP/sys in Longhorn now implements SSL. So all SSL is done in kernel mode. And IIS configuration all goes through HTTP/sys configuration, basically. But in terms of static file handling, caching, that's all done exactly the same as it was with IIS 6. Yeah?
Okay, my question is about the performance overhead with this componentization, because you're splitting it out. It used to perform better. Now you're bringing managed code into the system. That's my first question. Second question is about the overhead of keeping each trace information, because you don't know the error when you start the trace, right? You would know about the error only by the time you finish. So you have to keep track of the trace information for every single request that comes to you. I assume that's right.
Yep.
So is there a way to control it if you want a performing server?
Yeah. So there's kind of a two-part question. In terms of the first question, the impact of the componentization, it actually turns out that the componentization can actually help performance in that you can now remove modules that previously you never could remove that may have added cycles to the request. We've seen, actually right now in current builds, we're pretty much on par with IIS 6, and we still have a long way to go before ship. So we think we're going to be significantly further ahead in terms of throughput than IIS 6 was by the time we ship. The other thing to realize is that all of the IIS features that exist today with IIS 6 are ported over the native API, so they're all native modules. And the only time you're pulling in managed code and the framework is when you're using ASP.NET, in which case you're already using the framework, or you're implementing your own managed module or handler. That is a performance consideration to make in terms of whether you want to implement using native or managed code, because you will incur the overhead of the framework in the worker process. But it also enables a huge degree of flexibility and much more rapid development writing in C#. I could have never written the native module that did the directory browsing feature in C++ in 3 hours. Personally, I could have never done it. So it's probably possible, but not by me. So there are plenty of scenarios where that performance consideration maybe isn't the most critical. Maybe ease of development, rapid development is more important. On the second question around the automatic tracing capability, what we do is we actually have kind of a circular buffer of requests. And so we wait till the request completes or until it hits the timeout threshold, and then we log. Otherwise, we throw the buffer away. So there's not a significant overhead. We're still looking at performance tuning for it, but the benefit it incurs is much greater. The other thing to realize is that we don't actually listen to those requests until you go and configure for the condition. So by default, there are no conditions configured, no rules configured. If you went in and configured ASP, we would start listening or start monitoring for only ASP requests. So it's kind of an incremental thing.
By default, it's not on.
By default, it's not on. Yep.
My question is...
okay. One last question, and I'll have to wrap up. Sorry.
What percentage of IS7 is managed code?
What percent of IS7 is managed code? The admin tool that you saw is all managed code. So the other parts that are managed code in IIS are the parts that we've integrated with. So that basically, for configuration, system.configuration is the API that you access ASP.NET config today. You can now use that API to access IIS config as well. But it's not new managed code, it's just we've integrated with it. Pretty much that's it. It's the management side. The difference is you can now leverage all those ASP.NET modules that previously only were available for ASP.NET apps inside IIS. So that kind of brings in some IIS features that weren't possible before. But they're ASP.NET features, essentially.
More managed code performance?
Good question. We are, for a number of reasons. One, performance is one. I think the IIS team, the IIS dev team, are hardcore C++ developers, and they have been for 10 years. And a lot of the exercise for the componentization was a porting exercise, not a rewrite exercise. So we took our code and refactored it and replumbed it on top of the new APIs, but it wasn't a complete rewrite. So since we weren't starting from scratch and there's a long history of C++ usage, we stuck with that. It also has the lowest memory footprint and the highest throughput and all the performance benefits as well. But yeah, that's why we use native code. All right, I have to wrap up. I'll stick around though if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.